The scorching heat of the California sun had turned the mercantile store in Stockton into an oven by the time Lily Jane's vision began to blur at the edges, and she realized with growing horror that her corset was laced far too tight for such a merciless afternoon in July of 1872. She had been standing behind the counter for nearly 8 hours without rest, her father having taken ill 3 days prior and leaving her to manage the family business alone. The wooden floorboards creaked under her feet as she shifted her weight, trying to find some relief from the stabbing pain in her lower back and the dizziness that had been building since noon. At 22 years old, Lily had spent most of her life in this store, but she had never experienced a heat wave quite like this one. The thermometer hanging by the door read 107 degrees, and there was not even a whisper of breeze through the open windows. She was arranging a shipment of canned goods when she heard the heavy footfalls on the wooden boardwalk outside. The sound was different from the usual shuffle of townsfolk, deeper and more deliberate, like thunder rolling across distant mountains. Lily straightened up, brushing a strand of dark auburn hair from her damp forehead, and turned toward the door just as a shadow fell across the threshold. The man who filled the doorway was unlike anyone she had ever seen in Stockton. He stood well over 6 feet tall, with shoulders so broad they nearly touched both sides of the frame. His hair hung past his shoulders in dark brown waves that looked as though they had been tamed only by the leather cord holding them back. His buckskin shirt stretched tight across a chest that spoke of years spent wrestling nature itself, and his arms were corded with muscle that rippled as he ducked his head to enter the store. A thick beard covered the lower half of his face, but she could see sharp blue eyes that swept the room with the wariness of a wild animal entering civilization. The combination of the oppressive heat, her restrictive clothing, and the sudden overwhelming presence of this mountain of a man proved too much for Lily's overtaxed system. The room tilted sideways, her knees buckled, and the last thing she registered before darkness claimed her was the sound of those heavy boots rushing forward and a pair of impossibly strong arms catching her before she hit the floor. When consciousness began to return, Lily became aware of several things at once. She was no longer standing but lying on something soft. The terrible pressure around her ribs had eased considerably. Cool air was moving across her face, and there was a presence nearby, large and still, watching over her with patient silence. Her eyelids fluttered open to find herself on the settee in the back room of the store, the one her father used when his gout acted up. Her corset had been loosened, though not removed, enough to let her breathe properly. A wet cloth lay folded on her forehead, and someone had propped her feet up on a cushion. The mountain man sat in a straight-backed chair he had pulled close to the settee, his massive frame making the furniture look like it belonged in a dollhouse. He held his hat in his hands, turning it slowly between his fingers, and when he saw her eyes open, something that might have been relief crossed his weather-beaten features. "Easy now," he said, and his voice was a deep rumble that seemed to vibrate in her chest. "You took a hard fall. Would have cracked your head open if I had not caught you." Lily tried to sit up, but a gentle hand the size of a dinner plate pressed against her shoulder, keeping her in place with no effort at all. "Give yourself a minute," he continued. "You went white as a ghost and dropped like a stone. How long since you have eaten anything?" She had to think about that. Breakfast had been a piece of toast and some coffee, and that had been before dawn. "This morning," she admitted, her voice coming out weaker than she would have liked. The mountain man shook his head slowly. "And you have been working in this heat all day, I would wager. Where is your father? No man should let his daughter work herself into collapse." "He is ill," Lily said, finally managing to prop herself up on her elbows. "Has been for 3 days now. The doctor says it is pneumonia. I have been managing the store while he recovers." The blue eyes studied her with an intensity that made her feel oddly exposed, as though he could see right through to her bones. "You need food and water," he said flatly. "Do you have anything in this place fit to eat?" "There is bread and cheese in the cupboard," she said, gesturing vaguely toward the small kitchen area her father had built into the back room, "and water in the pitcher." The mountain man stood, and Lily was struck again by the sheer size of him. He moved with surprising grace for someone so large, finding the food and water without needing further direction. He brought her a plate with thick slices of bread and a generous wedge of cheese, along with a full glass of water. "Eat slowly," he instructed, settling back into the chair. "Your stomach will rebel if you rush it." Lily obeyed, partly because she recognized the wisdom in his words, and partly because something in his tone suggested he was not a man accustomed to being argued with. The food helped immediately, chasing away the lingering dizziness and replacing it with a bone-deep weariness. "I should thank you," she said between bites. "You saved me from a nasty injury. I am Lily Jane, and this is my father's mercantile." "Jackson Nolan," he replied with a slight nod. "I came down from the mountains to stock up on supplies. Did not expect to be catching fainting women." Despite everything, Lily felt a smile tug at her lips. "It is not something I make a habit of, I assure you." "This heat is unusual even for Stockton in July." "It is brutal," Jackson agreed. "I have been in the high country for the past 3 months. This valley heat hits like a hammer after the cool mountain air." "What brings you down from the mountains?" Lily asked, curiosity overcoming her usual reserve. There was something about this man that invited questions. Though she suspected he was not accustomed to answering many, Jackson was quiet for a long moment, his fingers resuming their slow rotation of his hat. "Hunting and trapping mostly," he finally said, "but supplies run low and a man gets tired of his own company after a while. I come down to civilization every few months to trade furs, stock up, and remind myself why I prefer the mountains." There was a weight to those last words that suggested a story, but before Lily could press further, the front door of the shop opened and a familiar voice called out, "Miss Lily, are you here? Your father is asking for you." Lily recognized Mrs. Henderson, the neighbor woman who had been helping care for her father. She started to rise, but Jackson was already on his feet, offering her a hand. His palm was rough with calluses, but his grip was careful as he helped her stand. "I am here, Mrs. Henderson," Lily called out, making her way back into the main room of the store, with Jackson following a respectful distance behind. Mrs. Henderson's eyes went wide when she saw the mountain man emerge from the back room, and Lily could practically see the rumors forming in the older woman's mind. "This is Mr. Nolan," Lily said quickly. "I fainted from the heat and he was kind enough to help me. Nothing improper occurred, I assure you." Mrs. Henderson's expression suggested she was not entirely convinced, but she was too polite to say so directly. "Your father's fever has broken," she reported. "The doctor says he is past the worst of it now. He should be back on his feet in a few days, though he will need rest." The relief that washed through Lily was so intense she nearly swayed again. Jackson's hand appeared at her elbow, steadying her with the same careful strength he had shown before. "That is wonderful news," Lily breathed. "Thank you for watching over him, Mrs. Henderson. I do not know what I would have done without your help." The older woman's expression softened. "It is no trouble, dear. We take care of our own in this town. Now you should close up the store and get some rest yourself. You look dead on your feet." "I cannot close early," Lily protested. "The miners will be coming down from the claims soon, and they always stop in for supplies. The miners can wait until tomorrow," Jackson's deep voice cut in. "Mrs. Henderson is right. You need rest." Lily wanted to argue, but she could see the determination in both their faces. Besides, the thought of lying down in her own bed, away from the heat and the demands of the store, was almost irresistibly tempting. "Very well," she conceded. "Let me just lock up properly." Jackson helped her secure the store, his presence somehow making the familiar tasks easier. When everything was done, he collected the pack he had left by the door and turned to her. "Where are you staying?" Lily asked before she could stop herself. "The boarding house down the street," he replied. "I will be in town for a few days at least. Need to see to the trading of my furs and gather what I need before heading back up. Then perhaps you will stop by the store again," Lily heard herself say. "When I am not fainting, I mean. I would like to properly thank you for your kindness." Something that might have been a smile appeared beneath Jackson's beard. "Perhaps I will," he agreed. "You take care of yourself, Lily Jane." The way he said her name, slow and deliberate, sent an unexpected warmth through her that had nothing to do with the oppressive heat. She watched from the doorway as he walked away, his long strides carrying him down the boardwalk until he disappeared around a corner. Mrs. Henderson appeared at her shoulder, making a thoughtful humming sound. "That is quite a man," she observed. "Not the sort we usually see in Stockton." "No," Lily agreed softly. "Not the usual sort at all." That night, despite her exhaustion, Lily found it difficult to sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Jackson Nolan filling the doorway of the store, all raw power and wild grace. She told herself it was simply the shock of fainting and being rescued that had her thoughts in such disarray, but she knew she was lying to herself. There had been something in the way he looked at her, the way he spoke to her, that had awakened feelings she had thought long buried. Lily had been courted before, of course. At 22, she had received her share of attention from the young men of Stockton and the surrounding area. But none of them had ever made her feel the way Jackson had with just his presence and a few quiet words. They had all seemed like boys playing at being men, while Jackson was something else entirely. He was carved from the wilderness itself, as solid and enduring as the mountains he called home. She rose early the next morning, despite having gotten little sleep, and went to check on her father before opening the store. He was sitting up in bed, color back in his cheeks, looking more like himself than he had in days. "Lily, girl," he greeted her with a weak smile. "Mrs. Henderson tells me you had some excitement yesterday." Lily felt her cheeks warm. "A mountain man caught me when I fainted in the heat. Nothing more dramatic than that." Her father's sharp eyes studied her face. "Mrs. Henderson seemed to think there was something more to it. Said he stayed with you until you woke, tended to you himself. He was being kind," Lily insisted. "Any decent person would have done the same." "Perhaps," her father conceded. "But Mrs. Henderson also said he looked at you like you were the only thing in the room worth looking at, and she has a good eye for these things." Lily busied herself straightening his bedclothes to avoid meeting his gaze. "You should focus on getting better, not on matchmaking." "I am your father," he said gently. "It is my job to worry about your happiness. You have spent so much time taking care of me in this store. You have not had much chance to live your own life." "I am happy," Lily protested, but the words felt hollow even to her own ears. Her father reached out and took her hand, his grip weak but warm. "You are a good daughter, Lily, the best a man could ask for. But I do not want you to wake up one day and realize you have let life pass you by while you were busy being dutiful." The conversation stayed with Lily as she opened the store and began the day's work. The heat was marginally better than the day before, or perhaps she was just being more careful about staying hydrated and taking breaks. She found herself glancing at the door every time she heard footsteps outside, her heart doing an odd little skip whenever she thought she recognized the heavy tread of mountain boots. But Jackson did not appear that day nor the next. Lily told herself she was being foolish, that a man like that had no real interest in a shopkeeper's daughter, that he had probably already completed his business in town and returned to his mountains without a second thought. It was late afternoon on the third day when the door finally opened and Jackson Nolan walked in, his presence immediately making the spacious store feel smaller. He carried a bundle wrapped in oilcloth under one arm. "Miss Lily," he greeted her with a nod. "You are looking better, more color in your cheeks." "Mr. Nolan," she replied, trying to keep her voice steady even as her pulse quickened. "I was beginning to think you had left town." "Had some business to attend to," he said, setting the bundle on the counter. "But I told you I would stop by again, and I am a man of my word." "What is this?" Lily asked, gesturing to the bundle. "Payment for your kindness," Jackson said. "I noticed your store does not carry many furs. These are prime pelts, wolf and fox mostly. Thought you might be able to sell them for a good price." Lily carefully unwrapped the oilcloth to reveal several beautiful furs, their pelts thick and lustrous. They were clearly worth a considerable sum. "This is too much," she protested. "You were the one who helped me, not the other way around." Jackson's blue eyes met hers steadily. "You let me tend to you without raising a fuss about propriety or what the town might say. You trusted me, a stranger, in a vulnerable moment. That is worth something to a man like me." There was something in his voice, a hint of old pain, that made Lily wonder what had driven him to the mountains in the first place. She wrapped the furs back up carefully. "Then I will accept them with gratitude," she said. "But only if you will let me offer you something in return. Will you join my father and me for dinner tonight? He has been wanting to thank you personally for helping me." Jackson hesitated, and for a moment Lily thought he would refuse, but then he nodded slowly. "I would be honored." 6 o'clock, Lily said, unable to keep the smile from her face. "The house is just behind the store, the one with the green shutters." "I will be there," Jackson promised. He spent the next hour browsing the store's inventory, asking thoughtful questions about prices and availability. Lily found herself enjoying the conversation, appreciating the way he listened carefully to her answers and treated her opinions with respect. So many men dismissed her knowledge of the business, assuming her father made all the real decisions, but Jackson seemed to genuinely value her expertise. When he finally left with a pack full of supplies, Lily found herself already looking forward to the evening. She closed the store an hour early, something she never did, and hurried to the house to prepare. Her father was out of bed for the first time, sitting in his favorite chair by the window. He raised an eyebrow when she told him about the dinner invitation. "So the mountain man returns," he observed with a knowing smile. "Mrs. Henderson will be thrilled. She has been pestering me for details about him." "Then let us not give her any," Lily said firmly. "This is just a simple dinner to thank him for his help. Nothing more." Her father's smile suggested he did not believe that for a moment, but he was wise enough not to push further. Lily threw herself into preparing the best meal she could manage with what they had on hand. She made a roast with potatoes and carrots, biscuits from scratch, and a dried apple pie for dessert. It was more elaborate than their usual fare, and she caught her father watching her with amusement as she fussed over every detail. Jackson arrived precisely at 6 o'clock, freshly shaved and with his hair pulled back neatly. He wore clean clothes, though they were clearly well worn, and carried a bottle of whiskey that he presented to her father. "Mr. Jane," he said, shaking her father's hand with careful strength, "it is good to see you recovered. Your daughter spoke highly of you." "Please call me Thomas," her father replied, "and I owe you a debt of gratitude for taking care of Lily when I could not." The two men settled into an easy conversation while Lily finished preparing the meal. She found herself sneaking glances at Jackson, noting the way he seemed to fill the small room with his presence. Yet he moved carefully, as though aware of his size and strength, and not wanting to accidentally damage anything. Dinner was a lively affair. Thomas proved to be in excellent spirits, and Jackson, once he relaxed, turned out to be a skilled storyteller. He regaled them with tales of life in the mountains, of encounters with bears and mountain lions, of harsh winters and abundant springs. He spoke of the solitude and the beauty, the challenges and rewards of living by one's own skill and strength. "Why the mountains?" Thomas asked at one point. "A man with your obvious capabilities could make a good living anywhere. Why choose such a hard life?" Jackson was quiet for a long moment, turning his glass of whiskey slowly between his hands. "I had a life down here once," he finally said. "A wife, a homestead outside of Sacramento. We were going to raise cattle, build something lasting." The past tense was not lost on Lily, and she felt her heart clench. "There was a fire," Jackson continued, his voice flat and distant. "Dry summer, a lot like this one. It spread faster than anyone could have imagined. I was in town getting supplies when it happened. By the time I got back, there was nothing left but ashes." "Your wife?" Thomas asked gently. "She did not make it out," Jackson said. "Neither did 3 of our neighbors. I buried them all, sold what little remained, and went up into the mountains. That was 5 years ago." Lily reached across the table without thinking, placing her hand over Jackson's. He looked up, surprise clear in his blue eyes. "I am so sorry," she said softly. "No one should have to endure such loss." Jackson turned his hand over, his fingers closing gently around hers. "It was a long time ago," he said. "The mountains helped me heal, the solitude, the simplicity of survival. Up there, things make sense in a way they do not down here." "But you come back," Lily observed. "Every few months, you said. Why?" Jackson's thumb brushed over her knuckles, the gesture almost unconscious. "Because as much as I love the mountains, I am not a hermit by nature. I need to remember that there is more to the world than just survival, that there is beauty in human connection, in conversation, in sharing a meal with good people." The look he gave her when he said that last part made Lily's breath catch. There was something in his eyes, a hunger that had nothing to do with the food on the table and everything to do with the connection forming between them. Thomas, tactful as always, excused himself shortly after dinner, claiming fatigue from his illness. It was an obvious ploy to give them privacy, but neither Jackson nor Lily protested. They moved to the small sitting room, and Lily poured them each a cup of coffee. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, and the temperature had finally dropped to something bearable. "Your father is a good man," Jackson observed, "and he is right to be proud of you. Not many women could manage a store alone while caring for a sick parent." "I did what needed to be done," Lily said. "Family takes care of family." "Still," Jackson persisted, "you have strength in you. I saw it that first day, even when you were at your weakest. You have steel in your spine." Lily felt herself blushing under his steady gaze. "I could say the same about you. It takes strength to survive what you have survived, to build a new life from the ashes of the old." Jackson set down his coffee cup and leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. "Can I speak plainly with you, Lily?" Her heart was suddenly pounding, but she kept her voice level. "Please do." "I have not felt drawn to another person since my wife died," Jackson said slowly, as though each word required careful consideration. "I thought that part of me died in the fire along with everything else. But then you fell, and I caught you. and something shifted. I have been in town for 3 days trying to convince myself to just leave, to go back to my mountains and forget about the auburn-haired woman with green eyes who fainted in her own store. And why did you not leave? Lily asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Because I could not stop thinking about you, Jackson admitted. Because for the first time in 5 years, I wanted something more than just solitude and survival. I wanted to see you smile, hear your voice, learn everything there is to know about you. Lily set down her own cup before she could drop it. I have been thinking about you too, she confessed. I tried to tell myself it was foolish, that we are strangers, that you live in the mountains and I have responsibilities here. But none of that seems to matter when you are in the room. Jackson stood and crossed to where she sat, kneeling before her chair so they were at eye level. Up close, she could see the scars on his face and hands, marks of a hard life lived fully. But she could also see the warmth in his eyes, the gentleness in his expression. I do not know what this is between us, he said. I do not know if it is wise or foolish, practical or impossible, but I know I want to find out, if you are willing. Lily reached out, her fingers trembling slightly as she traced the line of his jaw. He leaned into her touch like a wild thing discovering tenderness for the first time. I am willing, she said. More than willing. Jackson's hand came up to cup her cheek, his thumb brushing over her lips with reverent care. I am not an easy man, Lily. I have demons and rough edges. The mountains have made me more beast than gentleman in many ways. I do not need a gentleman, Lily said firmly. I need someone real, someone true. Someone who will not pretend to be something he is not. Then you have found him, Jackson said, and he leaned in to kiss her. His lips were surprisingly soft despite his rough appearance, and he kissed her with a tenderness that made her chest ache. It was nothing like the fumbling kisses she had experienced with eager young suitors in the past. This was a kiss from a man who understood the value of restraint, who knew the difference between taking and being given. When they finally pulled apart, both slightly breathless, Jackson rested his forehead against hers. I was supposed to leave tomorrow, he said. Head back up to my cabin before the full heat of summer sets. In and now? Lily asked, though she was almost afraid of the answer. Now I find myself wanting to stay, Jackson admitted. At least for a while longer, if that would be acceptable to you. More than acceptable, Lily assured him. Though people will talk. A mountain man courting the shopkeeper's daughter will be the biggest news Stockton has seen in months. Jackson pulled back slightly, his expression serious. I do not want to damage your reputation, if you would prefer to keep this quiet. No, Lily interrupted. I am not ashamed of my feelings and I will not hide them. Let people talk. They always do anyway. A slow smile spread across Jackson's face, transforming his rugged features into something approaching handsome. Then I suppose I should find more permanent lodging than the boarding house, and perhaps make myself useful around town while I am courting you properly. Courting me properly, Lily repeated, warmth flooding through her at the words. I like the sound of that. Over the next few weeks, Jackson proved true to his word. He moved out of the boarding house and into a small cabin on the edge of town that he rented from a widow looking for steady income. He took odd jobs around Stockton, putting his considerable strength and skills to good use. He helped repair roofs damaged by winter storms, built a new barn for the livery stable, and even assisted the blacksmith with particularly difficult work. The townspeople were initially wary of him, this silent giant who had appeared from nowhere and claimed Lily Jane's attention. But Jackson's steady nature and tireless work ethic gradually won them over. He spoke little but listened much, and when he did offer opinions, they were thoughtful and well considered. Lily's father recovered fully from his pneumonia, which freed her to spend more time with Jackson. They fell into a comfortable routine, sharing meals together most evenings and taking long walks when the heat of the day had passed. Jackson told her stories of his life before the tragedy, of growing up on a farm in Missouri and coming west with dreams of building an empire. Lily shared her own history, of a mother who had died when she was 12, and the years she had spent helping her father build the mercantile into a successful business. They discovered they had more in common than seemed possible. Both had lost people they loved and learned to carry that grief while still moving forward. Both valued hard work and honesty over pretense and social climbing. Both found peace in simple things, a well-cooked meal, a beautiful sunset, the satisfaction of a job done well. But it was not all easy. There were moments when Jackson would grow distant, his eyes taking on a haunted look as memories of his dead wife surfaced. Lily learned to recognize those moments, and give him the space he needed, while making it clear she was there when he was ready to return. There were also times when the differences in their lives became starkly apparent, when Lily would mention plans for expanding the store or obligations to the community, and Jackson would grow tense, the walls of civilization closing in on him. "I do not know if I can be the man you need me to be," he confessed one evening as they sat on the porch of her father's house, watching the stars emerge. "Part of me will always belong to the mountains. The wildness in me, it does not just go away because I am living in town and wearing clean shirts." Lily took his hand, lacing her fingers through his. "I am not asking you to change who you are, Jackson. I fell in love with the mountain man who caught me when I fainted, not some tamed version of him." Jackson turned to look at her, surprise, and something like hope in his eyes. "You love me?" Lily's heart hammered in her chest, but she met his gaze steadily. "Yes. I know it has only been a few weeks, and people will say it is too soon, but I know my own heart. I love you." Jackson cupped her face in both his large hands, his touch infinitely gentle. "I love you too, Lily Jane. I have been fighting it, telling myself it was impossible, that I was being disloyal to my wife's memory. But the truth is, loving you does not diminish what I felt for her. It is just different." "You are different. How?" Lily asked softly. Jackson considered the question carefully before answering. "Sarah, my wife, she needed me. She was gentle and soft, and she relied on me to be strong for both of us. But you are already strong. You do not need me to complete you or protect you from the world. Being with you is a choice, not a necessity, and that makes it more precious somehow." Lily felt tears prick her eyes. "I do need you, though, maybe not in the same way, but I need you. You make me want to be braver, to take risks, to see what lies beyond the safe boundaries of my life here. Then maybe we can find a way to give each other what we need," Jackson said. "I do not have all the answers, Lily, but I know I want to try." They sealed the promise with a kiss that started tender and gradually deepened into something more heated. Jackson's hand slid into her hair, scattering pins and releasing the heavy mass to tumble down her back. Lily's fingers clutched at his shoulders, feeling the solid muscle beneath his shirt, the strength that had first captivated her. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing heavily, Jackson rested his forehead against hers. "We should probably stop," he said, though his hands remained in her hair. "I want to do this right, Lily. Court you properly, marry you with your father's blessing and the whole town watching. You deserve that." "What if I do not care about proper?" Lily asked, her boldness surprising even herself. Jackson groaned softly. "You are not making this easy on me, woman." "Good," Lily said with a smile. "I do not want to make it easy. I want you to know exactly what you are getting into with me." "Oh, I think I am beginning to understand," Jackson said, amusement warming his voice. "You are trouble disguised as a respectable shopkeeper, and you are a wild thing pretending to be civilized," Lily countered. "We make quite a pair." "That we do," Jackson agreed. True to his word, Jackson asked Thomas for permission to marry Lily a week later. Her father gave his blessing readily, clearly delighted at the prospect of his daughter finding happiness with a man he had come to respect. "But I have one condition," Thomas said as they sat in his study. "If you are going to be part of this family, you need to let us be part of yours. That means not disappearing into the mountains for months at a time. Lily would worry herself sick." Jackson nodded slowly. "I have been thinking about that. The truth is, I have been hiding in those mountains for 5 years, using solitude as a shield against having to feel things, to risk getting hurt again. But Lily has made me realize that is no way to live. So I am proposing something different." "What did you have in mind?" Thomas asked. "I keep my cabin up in the high country as a retreat, somewhere we can go when we need peace and quiet. But I make my primary home here in Stockton with Lily. I can guide hunting parties and survey expeditions, use my knowledge of the mountains in ways that do not require me to live as a hermit. And maybe eventually we find some land outside of town where we can build something of our own." Thomas extended his hand. "That sounds like an excellent plan. Welcome to the family, Jackson." The wedding was set for late August, after the worst of the summer heat had passed. Lily threw herself into preparations with an enthusiasm that both amused and touched Jackson. He helped where he could, building furniture for the small house they would rent until they could afford to buy land, and listening patiently as Lily debated the merits of different fabrics for her dress. "You could wear a flour sack, and I would still think you were the most beautiful woman in California," he told her one evening when she was particularly frustrated with the dressmaker. "That is sweet," Lily said, "but not particularly helpful." Jackson pulled her into his arms, tucking her head under his chin. "What can I do to help?" "Just this," Lily said, relaxing against his solid warmth. "Remind me that the wedding is just one day, and what matters is all the days after. Every day after," Jackson promised, "for as long as we both live." The morning of the wedding dawned clear and beautiful, with a hint of cooler weather in the air that promised autumn was on its way. Lily woke early in her childhood bedroom, butterflies dancing in her stomach. Mrs. Henderson arrived to help her dress, along with several other women from the town who had grown fond of Lily over the years. They fussed over her hair and dress, offering advice and well wishes in equal measure. The dress itself was simpler than many wedding gowns, made of cream-colored cotton with lace at the collar and cuffs. Lily had chosen it specifically because it was practical enough to wear again, knowing that Jackson would appreciate the pragmatism even as he insisted she looked like an angel. The ceremony was held in the small church at the center of town, with what seemed like half of Stockton in attendance. Lily's hands trembled as her father walked her down the aisle, but the moment she saw Jackson waiting at the altar, all her nervousness melted away. He wore a new suit that he had purchased especially for the occasion, though Lily could tell he was uncomfortable in the formal clothing. His hair was neatly tied back, and his beard was freshly trimmed, but it was his eyes that held her attention, blazing with love and promise as she approached. The ceremony itself passed in a blur. Lily heard herself speaking her vows, felt Jackson slip a simple gold band onto her finger, and then the preacher was pronouncing them husband and wife. Jackson kissed her with a tenderness that made her knees weak, and the church erupted in applause. The reception was held in the town square, with tables laden with food and drink that the community had contributed. There was music and dancing, toasts and laughter. Jackson tolerated the attention with good grace, though Lily could see the strain around his eyes as the hours wore on. Finally, as the sun began to set and the party showed no signs of ending, Lily caught her new husband's eye and gave him a small nod. They slipped away while everyone was distracted by a particularly enthusiastic fiddle player, hurrying through the darkening streets to the little house that was now theirs. Jackson closed the door behind them and let out a long breath. "I thought we would never escape," he said. Lily laughed, giddy with happiness and relief. "They mean well. Everyone is just happy for us." "I am happy for us too," Jackson said, crossing the room to pull her into his arms. "But I am also very glad to finally have you to myself, Mrs. Nolan." The sound of her new name sent a thrill through Lily. "Say it again," she requested. "Mrs. Nolan," Jackson repeated obediently, his lips brushing her temple. "My wife." "Mine yours," Lily agreed, tilting her face up for a kiss. This kiss was different from the chaste one they had shared at the altar. This was heat and hunger, promise and possession. Jackson's hands roamed her back, finding the buttons of her dress and working them free with surprising dexterity. Lily tugged at his jacket and shirt, needing to feel his skin beneath her palms. They made their way to the bedroom in a tangle of half-shed clothing and breathless kisses. Jackson lifted her as though she weighed nothing, laying her on the bed with a reverence that made her feel cherished beyond measure. "I love you," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "I will spend the rest of my life trying to deserve you. You already deserve me," Lily assured him, pulling him down to her. "And I love you too now. Stop talking and kiss your wife." Jackson obeyed with enthusiasm, and the rest of the night was lost to whispered endearments and the joy of two souls finally, completely united. The next weeks and months proved that marriage to Jackson Nolan was everything Lily had hoped and more challenging than she had anticipated. They settled into their little house, learning each other's rhythms and habits. Jackson rose with the dawn, unable to shake the patterns of mountain life, while Lily preferred to sleep a bit later when the store's schedule allowed. He was neat to the point of being fastidious, a trait developed from years of living in small spaces where disorder could be dangerous, while Lily tended toward comfortable clutter. But these small differences were easy to navigate compared to the bigger adjustments. Jackson took work where he could find it, but Lily could see him chafing at the constraints of town life. He grew tense when too many people made demands on his time, and there were days when his eyes would drift toward the mountains with undisguised longing. For her part, Lily discovered that loving a man like Jackson meant accepting that part of him would never be fully domesticated. There was a wildness in him that could not be tamed, only temporarily contained. She learned to recognize when he needed space, when the walls were closing in too tight, and she would pack him provisions and send him up to his cabin for a few days to breathe. At first, these separations were difficult for Lily. She worried that each time he left, He might decide not to return, that the pull of the mountains would prove stronger than his love for her. But Jackson always came back, usually within 3 or 4 days, with fresh game and a renewed appreciation for what they had built together. "The mountains will always be part of me," he told her one evening after returning from such a trip. "But you are my home now, Lily. The cabin is just a place. You are where I belong." Winter came, bringing snow to the high country and cooler temperatures to Stockton. Jackson proved invaluable during the cold months, his experience with harsh weather helping the community prepare and survive. He taught several of the younger men how to properly insulate buildings and store food for lean times, sharing knowledge gained from years of solitary survival. Lily watched him with pride as he patiently explained techniques and answered questions. This was a side of her husband she had not fully seen before, the teacher and leader beneath the lone wolf exterior. He might prefer solitude, but he was not incapable of community. He just needed it to be on his own terms. Christmas brought a surprise. Lily had been feeling unwell for several weeks, dismissing it as a winter cold or perhaps something she had eaten. But when the symptoms persisted, Mrs. Henderson took her aside with a knowing smile. How late are you, dear?" the older woman asked gently. Lily's eyes widened as she counted back, realization dawning. "Nearly 2 months," she breathed. "I have been so busy with the store and the house, I did not even notice." "Then I would say congratulations are in order, Mrs. Henderson said warmly. "You are going to be a mother." Lily's first instinct was joy, quickly followed by terror. A baby. She was going to have Jackson's baby. How would he react? Would he be pleased or frightened? Would the added responsibility make him feel even more trapped by town life? She decided to tell him that evening over a quiet dinner at home. Jackson noticed immediately that something was on her mind. "You have been quiet all evening," he observed. "Is something troubling you?" Lily took a deep breath, gathering her courage. "I have something to tell you, and I am not sure how you will take it." Jackson's expression grew concerned. "Whatever it is, we will face it together. That is what marriage means." "I am with child," Lily said simply. "We are going to have a baby." For a long moment, Jackson just stared at her, his face unreadable. Then, to her surprise and relief, his eyes began to shine with unshed tears. "A baby," he repeated, his voice rough. "Our baby." "You are pleased?" asked Lily, hope rising in her chest. Jackson was out of his chair in an instant, pulling her into his arms with careful strength. "Please does not begin to cover it," he said into her hair. Terrified, overwhelmed, incredibly happy. "A baby, Lily. We are going to be parents." "I know it is sooner than we might have planned," Lily said. "And I know it will make things more complicated, especially with your need to get away sometimes. But we will figure it out." Jackson pulled back to cup her face in his hands. "We will absolutely figure it out. And Lily, I want you to know, I am here. I am not going anywhere. This baby changes everything, but in the best possible way. It gives me something I thought I would never have again, a family." Tears spilled down Lily's cheeks, though she was smiling. "We are your family, me and this baby, and we need you. You have me," Jackson promised, "for always." The winter months passed, and Lily's pregnancy progressed. Jackson was attentive to the point of being overprotective, fussing over her health and trying to prevent her from doing any heavy work. Lily found it both endearing and occasionally frustrating, but she understood it came from a place of deep love and, she suspected, fear of loss. One evening, when she was about 5 months along, she finally confronted him about it. "Jackson, you need to stop treating me like I am made of glass," she said gently. "Women have been having babies since the dawn of time. I am not going to break." Jackson was quiet for a long moment, staring into the fire. "I know that logically, but I cannot help remembering Sarah. She was pregnant when she died. We had not told anyone yet, we're waiting until she was further along. But I knew, and I think about what might have been, about the child I lost along with my wife." Lily moved to sit beside him, taking his hand. "I am not Sarah, and this is not the same situation. There is no fire, no danger. Just a baby who will need both parents to be present and sane, not wrapped up in fears of what might happen." "You are right," Jackson acknowledged. "I know you are right. But the fear is still there. Then we face it together," Lily said firmly. "You lean on me when the fear gets too loud, and I will lean on you when I need strength. That is how we get through this." Jackson pulled her close, his hand coming to rest on the growing swell of her belly. "I can do that," he promised. Spring arrived with a burst of wildflowers and warm sunshine. Lily's pregnancy became obvious enough that even strangers could see it, and she endured endless advice and predictions about whether she was carrying a boy or girl. Jackson found the whole thing amusing, though he made it clear he did not care about the baby's sex as long as both mother and child were healthy. As summer approached, they made preparations for the birth. Mrs. Henderson agreed to serve as midwife, having helped deliver most of the babies born in Stockton over the past 2 decades. Jackson's built a beautiful cradle from mountain cedar, carving intricate designs into the wood during the long evenings. Lily watched him work, marveling at the skill in his large hands. "Where did you learn to carve like that?" she asked. "My father taught me," Jackson said without looking up from his work. "He was a furniture maker back in Missouri. I spent hours in his workshop as a boy, learning the trade. I thought about following in his footsteps before I decided to come west." "Do you ever regret leaving?" Lily asked. Jackson paused, considering the question. "Sometimes I wonder what my life would have been like if I had stayed. But then I look at you, at what we have built together, and I know I ended up exactly where I was supposed to be. All the pain and loss, all the years alone in the mountains, they led me to you. So no, I do not regret it." Lily felt her heart swell with love for this man who had suffered so much, and still found room in his heart for hope and happiness. The baby came on a hot July night, arriving 2 weeks earlier than expected. Lily's labor was long and difficult, lasting nearly 20 hours. Jackson stayed by her side the entire time, holding her hand through the pain and whispering encouragement when she was certain she could not go on. Finally, as dawn broke over Stockton, their son entered the world with a lusty cry that announced his displeasure at being evicted from his warm home. Mrs. Henderson cleaned him up and placed him in Lily's arms, and both parents stared in wonder at the tiny, perfect human they had created. He had Jackson's dark hair and what looked like it might become his father's blue eyes. His hands were miniature versions of Jackson's, with long fingers that gripped Lily's thumb with surprising strength. "He is perfect," Jackson breathed, his voice thick with emotion. "Absolutely perfect. What should we name him?" Lily asked, unable to tear her eyes away from their son's face. Jackson thought for a moment. "I would like to name him Thomas, after your father, if that would be acceptable to you." Lily felt tears spring to her eyes. "Papa would be so honored." "Thomas Jackson Nolan," Jackson said, testing the full name. "It has a good sound to it." Little Thomas proved to be a hardy baby with a strong will and powerful lungs. He kept his parents awake most nights for the first few months, and Lily found herself stumbling through her days in an exhausted haze. But Jackson was a devoted father, taking his share of nighttime duties and learning to change diapers and rock the baby to sleep, with the same determination he applied to everything else. Watching her husband with their son, Lily fell in love with Jackson all over again. He was so gentle with Thomas, this huge man who could break a grown man's arm with barely any effort, handling their tiny baby with infinite care. He sang old mountain songs in his deep rumble of a voice, and Thomas would quiet immediately, staring up at his father with rapt attention. As Thomas grew, Jackson began talking about finding land outside of town where they could build a proper home. He wanted space for the boy to run and play, wanted to teach him about the wild places that had shaped his father. "I know you love the store," Jackson said one evening as they sat on the porch watching Thomas crawl around the yard, "and I would never ask you to give that up. But I need more room than this town can offer, Lily. I need to feel like I can breathe." Lily had been expecting this conversation for some time. "I have been thinking about that too," she admitted. "Papa is strong enough now to manage the store with some help. We could find land close enough that I could still come into town a few days a week, but far enough that you would have the space you need." Jackson looked at her with surprise and hope. "You would do that? Leave the house you grew up in? The town you have always known?" "I would go anywhere with you," Lily said simply. "You and Thomas are my home now. The rest is just geography." They spent the next few months searching for the perfect piece of land. Jackson had specific requirements, wanting good water access, timber for building, and proximity to game trails. Finally, they found a beautiful plot about 8 miles outside of Stockton, nestled in the foothills with a clear stream running through it and a view of the mountains that took Lily's breath away. Jackson bought the land using money he had saved from his fur trading days, combined with what Lily had put aside from the store. They spent that winter planning their house, drawing up designs that would incorporate both Lily's need for a functional home and Jackson's desire for space and simplicity. In the spring, Jackson began building. He did most of the work himself, though several men from town came out on weekends to help with the larger tasks. Thomas, now toddling around on sturdy legs, loved watching his father work. Jackson would set him up with scraps of wood and blunt tools, letting the boy help while staying safely out of the way. Lily divided her time between helping with the house and managing the store. Her father had hired a young man named Peter to assist with the daily operations, which freed Lily to focus on her growing family. She would drive out to the property most afternoons, bringing lunch for Jackson and spending a few hours working on whatever needed doing. The house took shape slowly but steadily. It was larger than their townhouse, with 3 bedrooms, a spacious kitchen, and a big main room with a fireplace Jackson built from river stone. He added a wide porch that wrapped around 2 sides of the house, perfect for sitting and watching the sun set over the mountains. They moved in during the summer just before Thomas turned 2. Lily stood on the porch that first evening, her son on her hip and her husband's arm around her waist, and felt a profound sense of peace. This was what she had been searching for without even knowing it, a life that honored both who she had been and who she was becoming. "Happy?" Jackson asked, pressing a kiss to her temple. "Incredibly," Lily confirmed. "This is perfect, Jackson. You have built us a beautiful home." "We built it," Jackson corrected. "This is ours together, Lily. Everything we have, everything we are, it is all shared." Life on the homestead fell into a comfortable rhythm. Jackson hunted and trapped, providing meat and furs they could sell or trade. He also took occasional work guiding wealthy hunters or surveyors through the mountains, using his knowledge to earn extra income. Lily continued to help manage the mercantile, driving into town 2 or 3 times a week and bringing Thomas with her. The boy thrived in the wilderness. By the time he was 3, he could identify animal tracks and knew the names of most plants and trees on their property. Jackson was a patient teacher, showing his son the skills that had kept him alive during his years alone in the mountains. When Thomas was 4, Lily discovered she was pregnant again. This time, she was more prepared for Jackson's overprotectiveness and managed to keep him from hovering too badly. Their second child, a daughter they named Sarah in honor of Jackson's first wife, arrived on a cool October evening. Jackson wept when he held his daughter for the first time, and Lily knew he was thinking of the child he had lost all those years ago. But these were tears of healing, not just grief. Sarah represented hope and new beginnings, a chance to honor the past while embracing the future. Thomas was enchanted with his baby sister, wanting to help with everything. Jackson had to gently explain that 4-year-olds were not quite ready to change diapers or give bottles. But there were other ways to be a good big brother. Thomas took his responsibilities seriously, bringing his sister toys and singing to her in a sweet, off-key voice that made both parents smile. The years passed in a blur of hard work and simple joys. They added on to the house as their family grew, welcoming a 3rd child, another son they named Michael, when Sarah was 3. Jackson built a larger barn and began raising horses, finding he had a gift for training them. Lily expanded her involvement in the mercantile, eventually buying out her father's share when he decided to retire fully. They were not wealthy, but they were comfortable. More importantly, they were happy. Jackson had found a way to balance his need for wilderness with the responsibilities of family and community. He still took occasional solo trips up to his mountain cabin, but they were brief now, a few days here and there, rather than the months-long absences of his previous life. Lily had learned to love the wild places that meant so much to her husband. Jackson taught her to ride, to shoot, to read the signs of weather and wildlife. They would sometimes leave the children with Lily's father and spend a week in the mountains. Just the 2 of them, reconnecting with each other in the wilderness that had brought them together. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Jackson surprised Lily with a trip to his cabin. They rode up into the high country, following trails that Jackson knew by heart. The cabin was small but well-maintained, a testament to the years Jackson had spent there alone. That night, sitting by the fire with the vast silence of the mountains all around them, Jackson took Lily's hand. "Do you ever regret it?" he asked. "Giving up town life, taking on all the hardships of living out here." Lily looked at her husband, this strong, gentle man who had taught her so much about resilience and love. His hair was starting to show gray at the temples now, and there were lines around his eyes from years of squinting into the sun. But he was still the most handsome man she had ever seen. "Not for a single moment," she said honestly. "My life before you, it was good but incomplete. I did not even know what I was missing until you caught me in that doorway. You gave me adventure and purpose and a love I never imagined possible. How could I regret that?" Jackson pulled her close, his arms strong and sure around her. "I was dead before I met you," he confessed, "just going through the motions of living without any real purpose. You gave me back my life, Lily. You and our children, you are everything to me. They made love that night in the small mountain cabin, their bodies familiar and beloved to each other after a decade of marriage. And later, wrapped in blankets in each other's arms, they talked about the future. Thomas is asking when he can start coming on longer trips with me, Jackson said. I think he is ready. He has a good head on his shoulders and solid skills. He worships you, Lily observed. He wants to be just like his father. I hope he becomes better than me, Jackson said. Smarter, kinder, more at peace with himself. He will be his own person, Lily predicted, just as Sarah and Michael will be. We will give them the tools and guidance they need, and then we will trust them to make their own paths. When did you get so wise? Jackson asked with a smile in his voice. I married a mountain man and survived, Lily said dryly. That teaches wisdom pretty quickly. Jackson laughed, the sound rich and warm in the darkness. That it does. They stayed in the mountains for 3 more days, hiking and fishing and simply being together. When they finally rode back down to the homestead, they found everything running smoothly under the watchful eye of Lily's father, who had stayed with the children. They were angels, Thomas reported proudly. Well, mostly. Michael tried to feed Sarah mud yesterday, but I stopped him. Good job, Jackson said gravely, ruffling his son's hair. Looking after your siblings is important work. As the children got older, they each developed their own interests and personalities. Thomas, as predicted, became his father's shadow, learning everything Jackson could teach him about the mountains and survival. Sarah proved to have Lily's head for business and numbers, and Michael showed artistic talent, filling page after page with drawings of the wildlife and landscapes around them. Jackson and Lily supported each child's interests, while making sure they also learned the practical skills they would need to survive in this harsh but beautiful land. By the time Thomas was 16, he was capable of running the entire homestead on his own. Sarah, at 12, was helping Lily with the store's bookkeeping and proving to be a shrewd negotiator. Michael, at 9, had already sold several of his drawings to wealthy tourists passing through Stockton. We have done well with them, Jackson observed one evening as they watched the children from the porch. Thomas was showing his younger siblings how to properly care for the horses, his patience and gentleness a mirror of his father's. They are good people, Lily agreed. I could not be more proud. Jackson turned to her, his blue eyes soft with love. I could not have done any of this without you, you know. You made me believe that I deserved a second chance at happiness. We made each other believe, Lily corrected. I was stuck in a safe but limited life before you came along. You showed me that there was more to the world than just duty and routine. And you showed me that civilization did not have to be a cage, Jackson said. That I could be part of a community and still be myself. They stood in comfortable silence for a while, watching the sun paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. After all these years, Lily still felt a thrill when Jackson took her hand, still felt her heart skip when he looked at her with that particular expression that said she was his whole world. I love you, she said, the words as true now as they had been the first time she spoke them. I love you too, Jackson replied. Always have, always will. The children grew, and eventually began making their own ways in the world. Thomas, at 18, announced his intention to start his own guiding business, using the skills Jackson had taught him to lead hunting and exploration parties through the mountains. Jackson helped him establish the business, introducing him to contacts and teaching him the finer points of negotiating with wealthy clients. Sarah, when she turned 16, asked if she could take over more of the store's operations. Lily was thrilled, recognizing that her daughter had both the passion and the skill to run the mercantile successfully. They worked together for 2 years, with Lily gradually stepping back until Sarah was managing almost everything independently. Michael's artistic talent continued to develop, and when he was 14, a wealthy art collector from San Francisco saw his work and offered to sponsor his education. After much family discussion, they decided to let him go, with the understanding that he would always have a home to return to. As their children became adults and started their own lives, Jackson and Lily found themselves with more time for each other than they had had in years. They took longer trips into the mountains, spent leisurely afternoons on the porch reading and talking, and rediscovered the simple pleasure of each other's company. I never thought I would reach this stage of life, Jackson confessed one evening. They were in their late 40s now, still healthy and strong, but beginning to see the first real signs of aging. After Sarah died, I assumed I would live alone until I eventually died alone up in the mountains somewhere. Instead, you are stuck with me, Lily said with a smile. Instead, I am blessed with you, Jackson corrected, and with the family we have built together. Sometimes I still cannot believe how much my life changed the day you fainted in your store. Best fainting spell I ever had, Lily quipped. Jackson laughed, pulling her into his arms. I caught you then, and I will keep catching you for as long as we both live. And I will keep falling, Lily promised, knowing you will always be there. The years continued to pass, bringing both joys and sorrows. Lily's father died peacefully in his sleep at the age of 78, surrounded by family. They mourned his loss deeply, but took comfort in knowing he had lived a full and happy life. Jackson's health remained remarkably good for a man who had spent so many years in harsh conditions, though his joints began to ache in cold weather, and he moved a bit more slowly than he once had. Thomas married a woman from Sacramento he met while guiding a hunting party, and they settled on a piece of land adjacent to his parents' homestead. Sarah eventually married a young businessman from Stockton who appreciated her sharp mind and independent spirit. Michael never married, dedicating himself to his art and achieving considerable success in San Francisco. Though he returned home frequently to visit and paint the landscapes he loved, Jackson and Lily became grandparents, then doting grandparents to an ever-growing brood of grandchildren who thought their grandfather's stories of mountain adventures were the most exciting things in the world. Jackson took each grandchild on their first mountain expedition when they turned 10, carrying on the tradition he had started with his own children. On their 25th wedding anniversary, the entire family gathered at the homestead for a celebration. Jackson looked around at the crowd of children and grandchildren, at the life he and Lily had built together, and felt a peace he had never imagined possible in those dark years after his first wife's death. That night, after everyone had left and they were alone, Jackson led Lily out to the porch. The stars were brilliant overhead, and a cool breeze carried the scent of pine from the mountains. 25 years, Lily mused. Where did the time go? Into every moment we have spent together, Jackson said. Into our children and grandchildren. Into this life we have built. I would not change a single thing, not even the hard parts, Lily asked. Jackson considered this carefully. The hard parts made us stronger. They taught us what we were capable of, both individually and together. So no, I would not change even those. Lily leaned her head against his shoulder, fitting perfectly against his side the way she had for 25 years. I am glad I fainted that day. Jackson smiled, pressing a kiss to her hair. I am glad I was there to catch you. They stood together in the darkness, two people who had found each other against all odds and built something beautiful and lasting. The mountains rose dark and mysterious in the distance, a reminder of where Jackson had come from and how far they had both traveled. As the years went on, they slowed down but never stopped. Jackson still made occasional trips into the mountains, though never alone anymore. Usually, Thomas or one of the grandchildren accompanied him, eager to spend time with the old mountain man and hear his stories. Lily continued to consult on the store's operations, though Sarah had long since taken over day-to-day management. They added a rocking chair to the porch, then a second one, and spent countless hours sitting side by side, watching the seasons change and the grandchildren play. They talked about everything and nothing, comfortable in the silence and the conversation in equal measure. Jackson's hair went fully gray, and his beard grew white as snow. Lily's auburn hair faded to a beautiful silver, and her face gained lines that spoke of a life well lived and full of laughter. But when they looked at each other, they still saw the young woman who had fainted in a doorway and the mountain man who had caught her. Do you remember, Lily said one evening, how you told me you would keep catching me for as long as we both lived? I remember, Jackson confirmed. You have kept that promise, Lily said softly. Every day, in 100 different ways, you have caught me when I needed you. Jackson took her hand, his grip still strong despite the arthritis that plagued his fingers. And you have caught me just as often. We have held each other up, Lily. That is what love is. They were in their 60s now, with grown grandchildren starting families of their own. Thomas had taken over most of the physical work around the homestead, insisting that his parents had earned their rest. But Jackson still rose with the dawn most days, still walked the property he loved, still felt the pull of the mountains in his blood. One crisp autumn morning, Jackson woke to find frost on the ground and clarity in his mind. He rose quietly, careful not to wake Lily, and made his way to the kitchen. He brewed coffee the way he had learned decades ago in the mountains, strong and black, and carried 2 cups back to the bedroom. Lily was awake when he returned, her silver hair spread across the pillow and a sleepy smile on her face. "Good morning," she murmured, accepting the coffee gratefully. "Good morning, beautiful," Jackson replied, settling beside her. They sipped their coffee in comfortable silence, watching the sun rise through the bedroom window. This had become their morning ritual, these quiet moments before the day began in earnest. "I have been thinking," Jackson said eventually, "about everything we have built here, everything we have accomplished." "Having regrets?" Lily asked, though her tone suggested she knew better. "No regrets," Jackson confirmed. "Just gratitude, so much gratitude for the life you have given me, for the family we have created together." Lily set down her coffee and cuddled against his side, her head finding its familiar place on his shoulder. "We gave each other this life," she said. "Neither of us could have done it alone." "No," Jackson agreed. "We needed each other, still do." They stayed like that for a long time. 2 people who had weathered every storm together and emerged stronger for it. Eventually they rose and began their day, moving through the familiar routines with the ease of long practice. As autumn deepened into winter, they gathered with their family for Thanksgiving. The house was full of children and grandchildren, noise and laughter echoing off the walls. Jackson stood at the head of the table, looking at all the faces turned expectantly toward him, and felt his throat tighten with emotion. "I am not much for speeches," he began, his deep voice carrying easily over the chatter, "but I want you all to know how grateful I am for each and every one of you. This family, this life, it is more than I ever dreamed possible." He looked at Lily, who sat at his right hand, her eyes shining with tears. "Your grandmother saved my life the day I caught her in that doorway. She did not know it, and I did not know it, but she gave me a reason to live again, to hope again. Everything good in my life since that day has come from her love and strength." Lily stood and took his hand, her voice steady despite the tears on her cheeks. "And your grandfather taught me that life is not meant to be lived cautiously. He showed me the beauty of wild places and the strength that comes from facing challenges together. He has been my partner, my love, and my best friend for nearly 40 years. Their children and grandchildren applauded, several wiping away tears of their own. Thomas stood, raising his glass. "To Ma and Pa," he said, "the strongest, bravest, and most loving people we know. May we all be so lucky in love." "To Ma and Pa," the family echoed, glasses raised. The winter passed peacefully, with Jackson and Lily spending most of their time by the fire, reading and reminiscing. They spoke often of the early days, of the fear and excitement of falling in love, of the challenges they had overcome and the joys they had shared. "If you could go back," Lily asked one snowy evening, "and tell your younger self anything, what would it be?" Jackson thought about this carefully. "I would tell him that the pain he is feeling will not last forever, that there is light at the end of the darkness, and love waiting when he is ready to accept it. What about you?" "I would tell myself to take more risks," Lily said, "to not be so afraid of disappointing people or stepping outside the lines. You taught me that, Jackson. You showed me that the best things in life often come from taking chances." "We have had a good life," Jackson said, and it was not a question. "The best life," Lily confirmed. As they moved into their 70s, their health began to decline in earnest. Jackson's joints troubled him more often, and Lily developed a persistent cough that the doctor could not fully explain. But they faced these challenges the way they had faced everything else in their marriage, together and with determination. Their children worried, of course, and wanted them to move into town where help would be closer. But Jackson and Lily refused. This was their home, the place they had built together, and they would not leave it unless absolutely necessary. "We have lived on our own terms," Jackson told Thomas firmly, "and we will finish on our own terms too." Thomas, understanding his father's need for independence even after all these years, nodded, and arranged for someone to check on them daily, while respecting their desire to remain in their own home. The seasons turned, and Jackson and Lily celebrated their 40th wedding anniversary surrounded by family. It was a quieter celebration than their 25th, with both of them tiring more easily, but it was no less joyful. That night, as they lay in bed, Lily turned to Jackson. "Promise me something," she said. "Anything," Jackson replied. "When my time comes, do not shut yourself away again. Do not go back to being that lonely mountain man I met all those years ago. Stay here, surrounded by family, and keep living." Jackson's eyes filled with tears, but he nodded. "I promise. I do not know how I will face any world that does not have you in it. The same way you faced everything else, Lily said gently, with strength and courage, and by remembering that I will always be with you, in every sunset over the mountains, in every grandchild's smile, in every memory we have created together. They held each other close that night, two bodies that had weathered decades together, two souls that would remain intertwined no matter what came next. Lily's health continued to decline through the following spring. The cough worsened despite the doctor's best efforts, and she began spending most of her days in bed or sitting by the window, watching the world she loved. Jackson rarely left her side, bringing her meals and reading to her for hours. Their children visited often, and Lily found joy in each visit, in holding her grandchildren and great-grandchildren, and seeing the family she and Jackson had created continuing to grow and thrive. One warm May evening, with wildflowers blooming across the property and the mountains painted gold by the setting sun, Lily squeezed Jackson's hand weakly. "It is time," she whispered. Jackson felt his heart breaking, but he kept his voice steady. "I am here, my love. I have you. You have always had me," Lily said, her green eyes, still bright despite her failing body, locked on his, "and I have always had you. From the moment you caught me in that doorway, we have belonged to each other." "Always," Jackson confirmed, tears streaming down his weathered face. Lily smiled, reaching up to touch his cheek. "Do not be sad, my mountain man. We have had 40 beautiful years together. More than most people ever get. Be grateful for what we had, not sorrowful for what we are losing." "I am grateful," Jackson managed. "So grateful you gave me everything, Lily. Everything. And you gave me the adventure of a lifetime," Lily said softly. "I love you. Jackson Nolan, with my whole heart for all time." "I love you too," Jackson said, holding her hand to his lips. "More than mountains, more than sky, more than my own life." Lily's eyes drifted closed, a peaceful expression on her face. Her breathing grew shallow, then softer, then finally stilled. And Jackson sat beside her, holding her hand as the sun set and darkness fell, unable to let go of the woman who had been his salvation and his joy for 40 wonderful years. The family gathered for the funeral, and they laid Lily to rest on a hillside overlooking the homestead, with a view of the mountains she had grown to love. Jackson stood beside the grave long after everyone else had left, speaking quietly to his wife, making promises and sharing memories. True to his word to Lily, Jackson did not retreat into isolation after her death. He remained at the homestead, surrounded by children and grandchildren who made sure he was never alone for long. He still rose with the dawn and walked the property, though his steps were slower now, and he often paused at Lily's grave to share the day's events with her. He lived for 3 more years, years filled with family and memories and quiet contentment. He saw more great-grandchildren born, watched his grandchildren grow into capable adults, and took comfort in knowing that the legacy he and Lily had built would continue long after he was gone. On a crisp autumn morning, much like the one when he had first reflected on their life together, Jackson woke feeling peaceful and clear-headed. He made his slow way out to the porch, settling into his rocking chair with some effort. Thomas found him there an hour later, his coffee grown cold beside him, a gentle smile on his weathered face. He had died as he had lived the last 43 years, peacefully and surrounded by the beauty he loved, on the land he had built with his own hands. They buried him beside Lily, under the open sky with the mountains rising in the distance. And on the shared headstone, Thomas had carved a simple inscription. Jackson and Lily Nolan together in life. United in death he caught her, when she fell she caught him. When he was lost their love built a legacy that will endure. Forever the homestead remained in the family for generations, each new occupant adding their own chapter to the story while honoring the foundation that Jackson and Lily had laid. And sometimes, on quiet evenings when the wind came down from the mountains, people swore they could feel the presence of the mountain man and his beloved wife, still watching over the land and family they had cherished, still together as they had promised to be, forever and always.